Hey folks, this is incredibly exciting. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today for this LinkedIn Live. I wanted to give a shout out to my friends at Poynter, Josie Hollingsworth, Annie Aguiar, and the producer, Julia Fitzgerald. We're here to spend some time with you today to talk about what they don't teach you in J School. And this will be an inside look into what you'll find in our new Poynter course that we've created. It's called the Reporter's Toolkit, and you'll find more info on that at bit.ly/reporters toolkit. We'll be sharing more information about that toward the end of this session. It's open for enrollment, and we'll talk more about that at the end. So let's start off with a round of introductions. My name's Tom Huang. I'm an adjunct faculty member at the Poynter Institute and an assistant managing editor at the Dallas Morning News. In fact, that's where I'm calling in from, so you can see the real life newsroom behind me. I've taught at Poynter for the last 20 years, and I've been in my newsroom for 30 years. I know that's kind of an outlier, but I feel so important. I feel so strongly about this, and I can still remember what it was like to be an early career reporter in this field. So I've created this new course, the Reporter's Toolkit, to serve reporters who are in the first 6 years of their career. I hope that we've got many of you in the audience today. And please spread the word with your colleagues that this is going to be a meaningful class. One of the joys of my long career is that I get to meet amazing journalists. And so we have two with us today, Fernanda Camarena and Kat McGrory. Fernanda, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name is Fernanda Camarena, and I am a faculty member here at Poynter. My training concentration would be ethics, leadership, craft. I also do coaching for reporters, managers, newsrooms. Before joining Poynter, I was the manager of standards and practices with NBC News. Before that, I was senior editor for the Texas Newsroom, a collaboration around all Texas stations and NPR. And before that, well, I was a reporter and I was also an editor, just like you all, at the Center for Investigative Reporting at Reveal. I am based in San Antonio, and I am super excited to be here with you and to get rolling with this great training that Tom has assembled. It is truly something that I think it's needed, not only, in newsrooms, but in the industry. And there's so many things that we are not taught at J School. So let's get to the nuances and the, beautiful life as a journalist. So happy to be here.
And the serendipity of life is that I've known Kat for years, but I ran across her at a gala several months ago and realized, Kat, you need to be involved with this. Introduce yourself.
I am fortunate. It was great to run into you there, Tom. Hey everyone, I'm Kat McGrory. I am coming to you from St. Petersburg, Florida, not all that far from the Poynter Institute itself. I have spent my entire career here in the great state of Florida. I started off many moons ago as a young reporter at the Miami Herald. Covered a little bit of everything. I started off, as so many of us do, covering breaking news. I was on a shift first thing in the morning, running and gunning. From there, moved into being the schools beat reporter. I covered Miami City Hall. I went to Tallahassee and was a state government reporter for a while. After that, I went to the Tampa Bay Times and was an investigative reporter and editor there. I spent a few years at ProPublica on the national investigative reporting staff. And I am now at the New York Times. I am part of the editing staff on the new local investigations fellowship.
That's amazing. So for the good folks in the audience, just imagine getting to work with Fernanda and Kat, as they're going to be on the faculty of the Reporters Toolkit seminar. So thank you both for being here. Let's jump right into it. For me, I'm still in the newsroom every day. I know local newsrooms face a lot of the same challenges. I really care deeply about our reporters, and I know that early career journalists face incredible challenges. I mean, you're entering a field that's been totally disrupted and is trying hard to find sustainability. So there's a whole digital transformation part of it. We have all just gone through a pandemic, and we're entering a workplace that's trying to figure out how to be hybrid. So that's both in office and remote. And because of a generational shift, there really may not be that many veteran reporters and editors like me in your newsroom. And so that knowing how important the apprenticeship model has been in newsrooms across the country, that's definitely a gap. So we've all been thinking about what we can do to help out. We've created the Reporters Toolkit, which will be weekly 90 minutes a week virtual seminar that will run from May 7th to June 11th, so for 6 weeks. And there will be one-on-one coaching involved with that seminar as well. So a couple of themes that we wanted to drill into today. One is thinking through the essential craft of reporting and writing and what we learned early on in our careers and what we think we can share. Secondly is how to navigate the new newsroom. We know that there are challenges in doing that in a hybrid way. And then third, most importantly, we want you and all of us to be journalists with integrity. So we're going to talk a little bit about ethical decision making and just those tough questions that we have to face on a daily deadline. So let's go back to the essential craft of reporting and writing, skills that we think were important to us in the first 6 years of our own careers. Even after school, and not all of us went to J school. I did not go to J school, but how did we build essential skills for ourselves in our first few years? Let me throw it to Fernanda to talk through kind of what some really important essential skills were that you built early on.
Yeah. So, some background on my end. I was born and raised in Juarez, Mexico, and travel every day back and forth to El Paso to study. So I always lived in Juarez, but I never studied there. I always studied in El Paso, but I never lived there. So that dynamic is a beautiful experience, a lived experience of many of us that, I always say that it's not a unique story, it's a cliche story at the border, but it's a powerful one. And to recognize that the value of my lived experience took quite a time, and it took mentors, and it took people that supported me and that viewed that as an asset, that saw my value not only as a journalist but as a human being. And that experience really informed how I took journalism, because I recognized that we have to be human, right? We have to not only go in and approach the story with integrity and due diligence, and we need to prepare ourselves. But at the end of the day, we need to see how much value the people providing that story have in our reporting, and frankly in the way we do our work as journalists. So one of the skills that I've always come to highlight is how you interview and how you approach sources. And um, in a lot of the work that I did with CIR, the Center for Investigative Reporting, it was pretty much centered on accountability. And we had journalists sources rather, that were, yes, officials, newsmakers, people that we should be held accountable. And, that set of that group basically doesn't, we emphasize a lot of it, and a lot of our approach on how to tackle interviews and information. And sometimes we forget where the story is, right? The stories that is out there in the community and the sources that we're dealing with, and a lot of them all are actual vulnerable sources. So one thing that we have created at Poynter, and actually my colleague Callie McBride and I, and Callie, she's the vice president of Share of the Newark, and it's a Center for Ethics and Leadership here at Poynter. She and I have a course on how to deal with vulnerable sources, how to identify them, how to engage with them, how to treat them with, you know, dignity and respect. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about in this course. But back to your question, Tom, I would say, you know, for me, it's remembering who we are as a journalist, our lived experience, value that, and also how are we showing up at work, and how are we taking our lived experiences in the newsrooms, and how are we making those valuable with the reporting that we're making.
I love what I'm hearing from what you're saying, Fernanda, and just having had the opportunity to teach at UT El Paso and meet all the incredible journalism students there. I always tell them that they may not know it, but they have a special background, many of them growing up in the borderland area and being able to navigate many cultures at once and knowing how to build relationships across cultures. I mean, that's, you know, they're learning that at a very young age, as I'm sure you did. And you know, part of what you're saying is, you know, we often think of journalism as a career, but it's really in some ways a way of life, and we have to learn how to be ourselves as we're reporting and editing. And in order to be ourselves, we need to understand our backgrounds, what we learned, how our parents and families influenced us, and then have the courage to bring that to work. And I know that there are a lot of challenges when we try to do that. But you know, a lot of what I hear, Fernanda, from you is not forgetting the humanity and always treating everyone with some dignity. So that's really important. Kat, as you were jumping into this life and career, what were some essential skills that you realized that you had to learn?
It is definitely a life, huh? Yeah, I'm a proud J school graduate. You know, and I learned an awful lot in J school. I felt like it gave me a great foundation. It was a really spectacular jumping off point. But when I showed up at the Herald newsroom at 22 years old, I mean, it became very apparent to me how much I had to learn. And, you know, I was in a great position because there was just a remarkable group of people to learn from, you know, some of the very best reporters and editors in the business. And I think about how I did some of that learning, and it was organic. It was almost through osmosis. You know, I would be sitting in the newsroom and I would be listening to my colleagues on the phone and just observing what it was that they were doing in those phone calls. So, you know, in particular, when colleagues would be on the phone with people who were in positions of power, sometimes when they were doing confrontational interviews, I would listen to just how prepared they were. You know, these weren't interviews that were being done in a fly-by-night way. You know, the best reporters came prepared. They knew what to ask. And there was kind of a rhythm to the interview. You know, at some moments, my colleagues might ask a very open-ended question. In other moments, they might follow up with something very direct and very sharp. It was very deliberate. And I would just love to listen to those conversations and really to soak it all in and try to understand the pacing and then try to emulate that when it was my turn to get on the phone and to do an interview that might be a little tough or a little intimidating. And I would think some of those lessons also carried into the writing piece of it. You know, and one of the things my colleagues used to tell me was when I sit down to write a story, write with authority. You know, you are the reporter on this beat. You are the eyes and ears of the reader. You know this. So when you go to put together the story, you know, it's not a matter of, oh, this person said this and this person said this, and, you know, trying to please all parties and do kind of that false equivalency dance, but rather, you know the story. So write what you know and be confident in doing that.
Kat, some of what I heard you talking about is almost learning how to be a reporter in your own newsroom so that you're not only reporting for your stories, but you're also doing everything you can to understand who's in your newsroom, who are the best reporters, who do I need to try to, and I'm not saying this in a manipulative way, but just like who should I study? Who should I read? Who should I listen to? Can I sit next to this person for a day just to eavesdrop on their interviews?
Oh, for sure. And I feel like the people who were the very best interviewers in the room, when they had a call with somebody that was for a big story, you know, everybody in the room would kind of stop what they were doing and it would get quiet and everybody would want to listen and would want to hear.
So a couple of the sessions that we're going to have in our seminar are interviewing, as we've talked about. And then Kat's going to do a session on documents and public records. But we're even going to do some fundamentals like for me, both as a reporter and now as an editor, I feel like journalists set themselves apart when they come up with amazing story ideas. You know, Lane Gregory is an example of that. We all know her work. So how do you go about finding story ideas, and then how do you pitch these ideas? Because it's almost like, and this could apply for any field. I always tell younger reporters the skills that you learn can apply across many fields. But like, how do you pitch an idea so that your boss or your team or your organization really understand, you know, why you have to do that idea? And so that's another essential skill. For me, I would say that I did not go to J school. I'm actually a scientist by school and training, but always had writing in my DNA. So in my early 20s, I took a leap of faith, made a really hard decision, disappointed my parents, and made the jump to become a journalist. And I've never looked back. And so for me, I think the essential skill has always been taking a little bit of time to truly understand what the story that I'm writing is about. It's just one of the most difficult questions because we typically very quickly know what the news is, what the headline is, what the tweet is for a news story, but we seldom have a conversation, even a 5 to 10 minute conversation with our editor or with a colleague about why does the story matter? What's the point of the story? What's the story truly about, and can I distill it into one word? And all of those answers can change as I do more reporting, but just having the mindset that I'm always going to try to push myself and push others to think about the deeper meaning of a story, I think is really important, and it's how we set ourselves apart from all of the news and information that's floating around out there, which is to find really compelling stories. So we're going to go to some of your questions, but before we do that, let's talk about the second theme, which is navigating the newsroom. So some people talk about soft skills versus hard skills, and I tend to be less into making that differentiation. But I think that it is absolutely essential for early career folks to have some sense of how to navigate a newsroom. And I know that, you know, many folks just coming into the business went through a whole pandemic where they were pretty much doing a lot of stuff remotely, whether it was in school or at a first job. So I wanted to ask Fernanda, like what do you think Like what could you talk about that's essential for making things work in a newsroom and in a workplace?
Great question. So I have a word for that, but before I go in and reveal the magic word, um, uh, I'm coming from actual, like I did go to school, to J school in El Paso, Texas. So I did my whole career, my whole journalistic education. And part of what I've come to realize, even before graduating, or what really made a difference in what were the opportunities that I was carving for myself throughout. Um, I actually started at a very young age. When I was 18, I became the youngest reporter and news anchor for Televisa in Juarez, and I was put there I talk about it in my pivot session, which, by the way, I teach a course on the power of pivot. Um, and I was put there at a very young age to anchor the daily night newscast, which was the most high-rated newscast. And I did that, and then I went in and I was a local fixer for 60 Minutes when I was also like 19. Then I took in some internships with Univision and Telemundo. And the thing that has worked in my career has been initiative. And I think as journalists within our news organization, it is really hard to keep that in mind because we are thrown we're thrown into projects and responsibilities, and I've come to realize that within our responsibilities there is an opportunity for us to level up and to build on whatever it is that we're there to do. And the key element is to have the perspective of to see the value in an extra, and to have that initiative within your assigned role or story assignment. So I think that has not only improved the journalism that I've been able to produce, but has all truly opened so many doors. So I think that's something that we're going to talk about in this course, because it is truly important. And I think that there's mechanisms and there's frameworks for us to navigate. And ultimately is to have that initiative, we need to feel empowered. And again, it's tricky because sometimes our own newsrooms don't really empower us, or we lack that support, right, to feel confident and empowered. So I'm here to tell you that there's things that you can do, and there's frameworks that you can use to create that empowerment and to really execute what you want to do through initiative.
I think that's so important. I feel like the early career journalists who really excel are those who, whatever personalities they might have, I mean, these can be quiet people as well, but they know how to assert themselves at the right moment and find the people who will help advocate for them. For part of taking initiative, I think, is also finding your advocates in the newsroom. Kat, you're going to talk about navigating the newsroom, and then I would love for you to take on Vincent's question in the comments. So navigating the newsroom first.
Sure. Fernanda, I love what you said about initiative. I think that's absolutely right. When I think about navigating the newsroom, I guess backing up, when I think about newsrooms in general, newsrooms are notoriously colorful, interesting places. They are full of really big personalities. There is often a lot of creative tension in what is the best way to get a story, to present a story, and that's very much all part of it, right? It's part of what we do. So when I think about navigating the newsroom, in particular for early career reporters, one of the things I think is really important is kind of knowing which hills to die on versus knowing when an issue you can kind of leave it alone and go with the flow. I think you want to learn how to strike a balance between standing up for what you believe in and speaking your truth, and also being someone who is a good colleague who other people in the room want to work with. You know, and I think again, those are things that will really help you to be successful as you navigate your career and also as you navigate your coverage.
That's good. And then why don't you take Vincent's question, and then I'll take us back to navigating the newsroom. But Vincent, why don't you read Vincent's question?
Sure. So Vincent is telling us that he teaches a class of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors about news editing. And he asks, beyond the basics, being grammar, AP style, etc., what are the most important things budding journalists need to know about editing? And are there resources for journalism teachers? It's a really good question. When I think about editing, certainly there's kind of the back end of editing, you know, once you receive some copy, how do you clean up that copy, you know, correct any errors that are in there, make it more clear, get it ready for print, move it through the process. But there's a whole front end piece to it that is incredibly important, and that is helping guide the reporter towards the right stories, working with the reporter again on the front end to talk about things like focus and framing, to be there to look for holes in the reporting, to kind of be the reporter's guide, if you will, and to help them, you know, work through any type of ethical quandaries that they find. So there are all of these skills that kind of come into editing. And I think for sure the earlier you can start to exercise some of those muscles, the better.
Yeah, and Vincent, so I would add that so there's the bigger picture editing part, which is thinking about the framing and the focus of the story and getting your students used to having front-end conversations about their reporting and writing before they, you know, sometimes it's helpful to have a conversation before they even go out in the field to report. And then certainly when they come back and they're getting ready to write, that's a really important moment for the editor to talk with them. But then at the more granular level, I think just one really good piece of advice is for them to find a reading buddy, just someone who they trust, who's willing to read their copy after they finish their draft, just so that they can kind of talk about it and fix any spelling errors and things like that. But I'm also sure Poynter has online modules about fact checking and all of that good stuff. Let me wrap up on navigating the newsroom. So I think all of us were kind of also talking about the importance of finding mentors, both in your newsroom and across the industry. So, and I don't know that that's always like top of mind for younger journalists, but it's essential to find those people, you know, like the people in this Zoom room who are committed to mentoring journalists. One of my first mentors in the business, Marvin Lake, a longtime editor at the Virginian Pilot, just passed away. And so I'm grieving his loss, but it's making me realize how much he did for me without, you know, even being asked, just showing me around Norfolk, talking to me about the stories I was working on, just really sparking this idea that it's so important to incorporate diverse cultures and perspectives into our reporting. And he really just kind of did that day by day, and talking about stories and reporting. And so, you know, thinking about the impact that he had on my life, and, you know, there were several other really key people who had an impact on my life, that just kind of brings home the point that younger journalists need to be assertive and put that at the top of the list of what they're going to do is scout around, do some reporting in the newsroom, and find that person or the people who will mentor you. And sometimes it's not going to work out. I mean, that's just the natural way of life, but eventually you will find those key mentors. Okay, let's go on. Yeah, go ahead,
No,
Fernanda,
I was just
please.
going to add, I agree because I think the what you're going to find in a mentor is going to be a voice that gives you a little bit more self-esteem. I think the newsroom can feel at times overwhelming, and you know we sometimes need a voice that reminds us our own self-worth. I remember a great mentor that I had who also passed away a few years ago. Um, she was a great source of love and inspiration. Ana Real, and she used to be the head bureau chief for international news at CBS network. And I remember, you know, when I first met Anna, it was at a the NEHJ convention. We connected. I went back to Juarez, and years later, she said, you know, it's your town is now considered the murder capital of the world. So we need a person to fix our stories and help us produce. And I was just so excited in my very young age to be able to work with her and to work with the network. And I remember at one point, you know, we were at the moment of completion, and I told Anne, I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm just, you know, very thankful for the opportunity. So I'm good, not getting paid, like straight up. And she lost it on the phone. She's like, are you kidding me? You have to charge for your work. You have to know your worth. This is like a professional situation. You know, you brought so much to the table. And what that taught me at a very young age is to know what we are worth, basically, right? So we're coming in with a lot of expertise, and we're coming in with a lot of enthusiasm. So I think what a good mentor would show you is pretty much a mirror, and in that, you know, a self-reflection of who you are and what you are worth in this industry. And that for me, Anna really did, you know, she had a great impact on that.
Kat, are you hearing anything else that you wanted to echo or reinforce?
Yeah,
Or
so much of this is resonating with me. It is so important to have mentors. I mean, and a mentor is a person who will be a gut check, somebody who has been in the shoes that you are in right now and who can help answer some of these, thorny questions as they arise. But also somebody who can help lift you up. It is absolutely essential to seek out a great mentor, and then once you have a couple years experience under your belt, to pay it forward and to be a mentor to the next generation of people who are coming up.
thank you, Kat. Before we move on to the third theme, which is around integrity and ethics, we wanted to take a couple of questions in the comments. So Julia asks, I'd love to know more about teaching things like audience development, social media, SEO, things that are not necessarily traditional storytelling, but where a lot of the new jobs are. So I guess what I would say is, depending on what community you're in, it'd be really great to connect with the local news organizations there and find out who is doing audience development and audience journalism work there, because they are really key journalists who could come to your and I'm guessing that these are classrooms that you're working in. They could come to your classroom and really talk about their real life work and the kinds of, yeah, how are they, what strategies are they using to build digital audiences for the stories in their organizations. So that would be my first tip for you. But Fernanda and Kat, do you have any other thoughts around helping students learn about audience development?
So, I mean, I would say it's interesting, Julia, that you are correct. You know, the social media SEO stuff is not traditional storytelling for our professions, but that's where a lot of the jobs are. And I think we have to approach this as they should be essential. And because that is where the audience is, right? We're here for the audience. And if we are not meeting them where they are, we're not necessarily fulfilling our roles as journalists and, as a news organization. So I would say to focus on training that really captures the interest and also the storytelling dynamic that happens in these social media. I mean, reporting for or uploading a video on TikTok is not necessarily the same as Facebook or Instagram, right? So I think the more specific you can get, and the more you know about your audience, the better you will be at strategizing ways to capture and ultimately produce content for them. Which, by the way, we have courses here at Poynter as well.
That's fabulous. And it's worth pointing out too that, when we talk about things like audience engagement and social media, those aren't just ways to disseminate work that's already done. There are ways that we as reporters can incorporate audience and social into the news gathering process. So to Fernanda's point, they are absolutely critical.
Let's go on to Cynthia's question. Cynthia is the director of a relatively new journalism program. Cynthia's working with students this week who are struggling with a story where there are few sources. She knows secondhand sources are less valuable, but what are some strategies that she can point her students toward? Fernanda and Kat, you want to take a stab at that?
I mean, I can jump in for sure. I mean, aside from any human sources, this might be a case where documents are going to be your friend. There may be public records that your students can seek out that can help them to tell the story. They can also turn to some of their sources and find out if they have records that can help corroborate or verify what those, small number of sources are telling them. Perhaps some of the sources, reached out and spoke to somebody else about whatever it was that was going on. And maybe it's worthwhile for the students to reach out to that secondary person as well. So there are a lot of creative strategies here that could potentially bear fruit.
I agree. I agree with Kat's point. Even data is a source. Knowing where you are in your reporting and what themes you're looking at, and if you go back with with information provided by an organization, you can then work backwards and reach the ripple effect of whatever it is that you're looking at. Or you can look at a policy and work backwards. So I would say sources are to be viewed as as valuable regardless of where they are. I mean, I think it's more so how you bring those sources in your reporting, that obviously you want to be fair, transparent, and accurate. But in the reporting process, I feel like a lot of journalists disregard people because they're not either, related to their beat or related to a story, but you never know when that person might really have a good piece of information, or when that person will be able to open up a door that brings in another set of, of better sources. So I would say just sources overall are good. And if you start with that state of mind and knowing that they each carry some value, I think you'll be able to open a few more doors for sure.
Thank you, Fernanda. So we want to encourage our audience members to put more questions in the comments. And as you're doing that, we're going to talk about our third theme of the day, which is around just the importance of being journalists with integrity and helping early career reporters approach ethical decision making. Before I began to study and work with Poynter, ethics was the way that I was introduced to Poynter, and I always thought that ethics were this kind of high and lofty stone tablet kind of thing, but it's actually very much everyday 24/7 part of our work. What are the tough questions that we need to ask of ourselves and others as we tackle sensitive stories and vulnerable sources? And what can we take even a couple of minutes sometimes to say, let's slow down a little bit and talk through how we're approaching the reporting and writing of the story. So let me start with Fernando. Why is it so important to have ethical decision making, and how do you see it kind of at the ground level?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before joining Poynter, I worked with the standards team at NBC News, where we provided guidance for standards for how the quality of journalism. And, we always viewed every story through the lens of fairness, accuracy, transparency. So every single story and, complicated things and language, we really looked into and, found ways to get through and be able to report, which by the end of the day, that's our goal, right? You want to report on things. So to your question, Tom, I think it should be happening. Ethics and standards conversations should be happening all the time. If your newsroom for some reason um, is not, and if you find yourself not capable or don't necessarily have, the environment to pose a question or to reflect on something and to in a way digest what's being covered and the way it's being covered, then you have to take that leadership role and start, bringing in people to have these conversations. And at Poynter, we actually have a framework with ethical decision-making process, and it's a 5-step process that will be teaching you throughout our course. But we talk about knowing your principles, knowing your journalistic purpose. What are the questions that you should be asking yourself while you make a ethical decision? What are the alternatives, and what are the solutions? So there are mechanisms that you can use to really help you navigate not only the newsroom, but the decisions that you're making that ultimately have a ripple effect, not only the reporting, but how the newsroom is managed. So yeah, I mean, I think that a topic like ethics and work that is being done around it should be intentional and should be very much it should access all levels of the news organization, and yeah, we should be constantly talking about it as we are right now.
I really agree. And I think one of the things that Poynter has taught me is, we often think of ethical decisions as a red light or a stoplight, which is like, we're not going to do this. But Fernanda, I think you've talked about the idea of green light, which is, let's figure out how we're going to do this
Right.
and try not to be either or kind of thing, like we're either going to publish it or we're not. It's like, is there a third or fourth approach to this?
Well, yeah, and ethics is very much in that gray zone, right? Nothing is white or black. I mean, few things are, but I would say it is about that spectrum, and we need to start with how can I make this, how can I push this forward? And if you start with a green light, then you welcome perspectives and you welcome ideas and collaboration. So a lot of things happen in that process. But as soon as you're shutting down and as soon as you're saying no, and you're not only blocking that not only creative thinking but proactive approach of problem solving, but perhaps it's not the best decision for the public. It might be a disservice for the public, right? So you want to start with an approach of how do we make it, or what can we do to get it out there and to really be fair, transparent, and accurate throughout the way.
And I can say just from personal experience, and I'm sure many in the audience have had this experience, and your colleagues are, is one of the first times you're going to face some tough questions for yourself is when you're pursuing a story and trying to get all of the story, but weighing that against the value of minimizing harm. So, for example, a story might be a sensitive one that involves private citizens and not public officials. Well, how much, knowing that we want to try to tell the truth, how much of the story can we tell, and when does it begin to disrupt or harm the individuals involved? And so those are some of the difficult and delicate conversations that you've had, I'm sure, and that you will have. Kat, how about you? How do you see all of this?
Well, I think you guys are both absolutely right. And I think to build on one of the themes that we've been talking about, um, you're not in this alone as a young journalist, as a journalist at any stage in your career. You are in a newsroom with other people who care deeply about the work that you're doing and that you are doing collectively as a news organization. People who care deeply about the community that you're in, and people who can help guide you as you make these decisions. So the one thing I would just add is that don't feel like you have to make these decisions alone in a vacuum. Find people who you trust and who you respect. And when you find yourself in a situation that feels perhaps a little dicey, or where there's a moment where, your spidey sense is telling you, slow it down, absolutely do that and seek out the counsel of others.
Okay, before we wrap up, Valeria has a question. As an early career journalist, I wasn't taught in school about the relationship between newsroom, editorial staff, and the admin advertising staff. Can you give some tips on how to have good work relationships with admin and advertising when sometimes we have competing interests and goals. I have some thoughts, but Fernanda, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the competing interests and goals shouldn't necessarily stop you. In fact, I think I would encourage you to have a relationship with folks around and across your newsroom. Sometimes we need to manage up, right? And the way is providing you providing information and making yourself visible. So any one-on-ones I would encourage. This way, you have the pulse of where things are heading, and they understand where you're coming from. So one actionable item I would say is encourage the one-on-one conversations. And it could just be once a week, once a month, but have that intentional and have as much of an open dialogue you can. And being, coming in with questions and being able to listen and to show them, that you care, because ultimately you actually do care. So you're starting at a very, very good point already by being curious and by actually wanting to know about them more.
And so I think Fernanda's talking more about kind of within the newsroom and making sure that you're building connections across departments and with editors. And then Valeria, if your question is specifically about advertising and the business side, I would encourage you to think about how your senior editors really are the ones who should have those direct relationships with advertising on the business side. And you can certainly be talking with your editors about it, but probably less, it's probably better that you not have direct lines to the advertising folks, because you just want to do your reporting and writing as independently as possible. And then your editors can make some decisions about not being influenced by advertising, but just understanding where the business opportunities might be, if that makes sense. Kat, do you have any other thoughts along those lines?
No, I think that's right.
Okay, so I hope that it was a meaningful hour for you. It certainly was for me. If our conversation resonated with you and you want to get more information about our new Reporters Toolkit seminar, check out bit.ly/Reporters Toolkit. I can tell you specifically that it will be 90 minutes every week virtually, and it will be May 7th through June 11th. Applications are due by the end of April, and we'll have sessions on brainstorming, pitching ideas, doing effective interviewing, using documents and records, focusing on structuring our stories, navigating the newsroom, and we'll also have each participant create a personal development plan so that they have actual action steps they're going to take to become stronger journalists, and each of them will get one-on-one coaching with some really good veteran journalists. So again, that's at bit.ly/Reporters Toolkit, and you can go to poynter.org and find it as well. And so with that, I wanted to finish today's conversation, give special thanks to Josie Hollingsworth, Annie Aguiar, and Julia Fitzgerald for producing this at Poynter. Then I wanted to give Fernanda and Kat the opportunity to talk about connecting with Poynter and supporting the Institute. Fernanda?
Sure, thanks, Tom, and thank you all for sticking with us and for your interest. So yes, if you're interested in this course and other trainings that we have at Poynter, feel free to go in our website, poynter.org. If you've actually enjoyed today's conversation, we will have this on our newsletters, which hopefully you're up to date. If not, subscribe. Make sure that you also go through our trainings and events. We have a lot of great seminars happening and one-off trainings as well. And we also have PolitiFact, which is our political fact-checking arm at Poynter, which they're doing great things. So by all means, go in and check them out. And MediaWise has our initiative with media literacy, and they are doing great things as well. So please check our website, subscribe to our newsletters, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
And then one final point, the Poynter Institute is a nonprofit that's supported by donors. And really, any contribution helps us in this mission to strengthen journalism and also democracy. So you can go to poynter.org/donate to help support our work directly if you'd like. And thank you all so much for attending. We really hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Fernanda and Kat.